what I've read,
Do you think it's a little bit laughable to say, like, to appeal to biology when it's suiting your argument, and then when I try to use your argument against you, to then like reflect retreat to I'm just not a biologist, so I don't know?
Like, pasta is a type of noodle, but it's not a noodle, is it?
Isn't it a noodle?
No, it's pasta.
But pasta is a noodle. You got to come up with a better
No,
example
it's
than that.
not.
So you're what? So you're saying a male femininity comes from biological sex?
Yes, men can. Okay, men can also, like, because this is the thing that you don't understand is that. Hang on, have a listen. This is
I'm
one thing that you
listening.
don't.
All right, we were discussing our trans women, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
I think that was it.
for sure. And so I guess the way I always open up this conversation is by getting a few key definitions out of the way, right? And I think it's the easiest way. Can you define sex for me?
Sex. Well, it's sex is pretty simple. It's the biological. Well, it's the biological differences between male and female. Like, there are two sexes, male and female. There are characteristics that all within sex, such as females being having ovaries, womb, vagina, breasts, XX chromosome. Was it XX? I always get them confused. Then
I never remember either.
yeah, I think it's XX, and
I would think it's XY for
they've.
females.
I can't
Because I
remember.
think males
Either way,
only produce X, and then females have the potential of producing X or Y. I think.
I thought it was the
Wait,
other way
no.
around.
Females only produce X, and then males have the potential to produce X or Y.
I thought it was at the because I'm not a biologist. I don't know this shit. I thought it was that the women need the man's why. I thought that was the whole thing with it, but that's fine.
I don't know.
Um,
Whatever it is, I'm gonna look it up now while you're saying it.
yeah. Like the characteristics, they usually have like smaller head, smaller stature. There's even just physical ones that we can notice on them, such as their waist to hip ratio. They typically will have smaller and slanted shoulders. Men will typically have broad shoulders. Like, there's a lot of really defining characteristics. Men will have have more muscle, bigger, stronger, different levels of bone density between the two. Like, there's a huge amount of traits that we can look into,
But this is
which
wait, hold on.
some are more
We
specific
don't.
than others.
Well, yeah, we don't got to get too specific. But I think a
Yeah.
good way is what you said. What sex is. Reference to biological differences between male and female, and then that there are characteristics within sex, such as females having ovaries, womb, vagina, and breasts, and
Yep.
XX chromosomes, whereas males have XY chromosomes and obviously
And a
descended
penis and
testes and all those
testicles.
things, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's sex. Do you believe there's a difference between gender and sex, or do you think that they are the same?
Well, so whenever anybody's really talked to me about gender, usually the way that they've used it is to it's like it's a bit weird, and it's something that I don't necessarily take as scientific. It's kind of like people use it, and I'm not a scientist, so it's not a huge deal, but still, I'd like to take objective information and use that. Um, but gender is typically what people want to represent themselves. That's what I've heard. Like, I haven't done any
Wait,
gender studies or anything like that, but
okay.
it's what they they want to represent themselves. They do it by taking, like, social norms from either of the two sexes, such as and social norms can change over time. Excuse me. Um, but generally, there are certain characteristics that men and women have that make them very different. Oh, actually, that's the thing. The masculinity, femininity thing. I remember that. Um, like somebody who generally represents themselves as male for gender would be have a more masculine look, would act more masculine. You know, just a lot of more masculine things would be on their side, and then the opposite for women, more feminine. They take on more feminine traits, this, that, and the other. You know, it's just generally it's how they express themselves. That's what I've been told. So it's a bit of a difference.
Okay. Well, so even when it comes out to how a person is representing themselves, for example, like society would assign gender to people regardless of like what their intention was to represent. It's just like we would say this person is a female or this person is a male, right? I mean not female. This person is a woman or this person is a man, and society would kind of like say these are manly characteristics versus these are women characteristics. Whether a person chose to represent themselves or not, like we've
I don't
typically.
know. I don't know who does that. Like, if I'm being completely honest, whenever I've gone out into the world and I've talked to people, like it's kind of like almost an automatic instinctual thing. I don't go. This person represents themselves as female. I look at them and I go, that's a woman. That's a female.
Right,
Like I
but
don't.
no,
I've
no, sure, but then again, but then society would say that there are specific characteristics we would say would be associated with that. For example, you've probably heard the phrase before, "That's woman work," right?
Oh yeah, yeah, but that's a social norm that
Right, that's what I'm saying. That's why I
that
said
we've created.
society. I said society. So then, yeah, sure. So like that would be social norms that we would assign to given to different genders. But clearly, there is a so just to make sure that I got your definition right for gender, you said specifically gender isn't scientific. You said gender can be what people want to represent themselves as, and that they take the social norms from the two sexes, which can change over time, and that.
Well, you can utilize it in social sciences, I guess, but
Well, sure,
it's
sure, sure. Hold on. I'm just making sure I'm capturing the definition. And then you said these social norms can change over time, and you said that there is masculinity and femininity, and those sort of traits are typically assigned to different genders. Is that a good representation of what you believe gender to be?
yeah, that's from what I know. Like, there's probably other things that I'm missing, but
For the most
it's
part,
not a big deal.
I totally agree with that definition. Okay, so then working from that definition, then we have to recognize that gender and sex are not the same thing. Because whereas you said the first one, sex, was biological, and you said that and obviously we know biological is scientific because biology is the study, right? Like it's a scientific study. Um, and so gender is clearly not scientific. And so it's going to be something completely different. It's going to be something social, right? And
Right.
so then that means then when we start talking about what makes someone a woman versus what makes someone a man or any of those things are going to be more social than they are
But
biological.
I'll tell you, the only thing that um, makes this not work for me is the fact that you can't, you literally, to me, you can't have gender without sex.
Oh, okay, wait, hold on.
Sex is the
You're
basis.
jumping ahead, right? Because all I'm doing right now is just establishing the facts that we agree on. You don't have to worry about jumping ahead to wait, hold on, make sure that you don't take this somewhere else. We can at least make sure that
Yeah.
we're going on the same road. When we get to the
Right.
divergence, then point that divergence out. But as it stands now, I'm just making sure that I'm phrasing your definitions and using them appropriately in a way that we both agree with. And so far, you would agree that sex is different than biology, than gender, and that society does have different definitions for what a sex is and what a gender is, and that society, yes, and that society sort of
Yeah,
has.
I'd say they're different, even though they have been used for the same thing before,
Hmm.
like such as forms.
Hmm.
A lot of forms over here in Australia, they will have gender, and then others will have sex.
Hmm.
I saw another. Oh, I had a link here for it. I think it was you guys in America. You like messing around with a lot of these things. Your agencies, one of your agencies used gender instead of sex for animals. Yeah, the social sciences have a branch devoted to gender. No, not gender studies. Which one is it? It was for animals. Okay. So it was gender is commonly used to refer to the biological sex of animals. The change in the meaning of gender can be traced in 1980s and 1993 in the U.S. Food and Drug, and the FDA reversed its position using sex as a biological classification and gender. So and
Okay,
and gender as a person's self-representation of male and female. So
okay. But
later
hold
on,
on,
the
wait, wait,
FDA
wait, wait,
used the
wait,
term
wait, wait, wait.
sex.
But just to be sure, even though you're saying gender is a self-representation between male and female, that we also recognize that again, some of that is not going to be self-represented, right? For example, it's not a matter of a person choosing to express themselves in a given way that would make them automatically a woman. For some people, it would just be like it's almost a given, right? Like you're having children, you want to be, you're getting married, and so on and so forth. And there's all of these other traits that society would say it's just indicative of womanhood and that it would be automatically assigned, right? For most people, there is no actual decision on when to start like choosing to represent themselves in any given way. This is just something that's kind of happens automatically, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's certain things that we, um, yeah, this. Well, but what do you like? Could you expand on that a little bit more?
Okay, sure. So, for example, we'll say most of the time, like when you have an adult female, people would immediately assign womanhood to that thing, right?
Right.
Like, and that has nothing to do with a person's self-expression or self-identity. Society would say this adult female is a woman, and like,
Yeah, it's
and this
true.
would be
Yes,
true for like
society is.
99.9% of people, right?
Yeah, society is based off consensus. Yep, it's
hmm
true.
And so for like 99% of people, this has nothing to do with like any conscious choice or any conscious decision. So then that means, and the only reason why I'm establishing this is because I want to make sure that because there is a specific thing where there's self-identification when it comes to gender, right? And I think some of those things is where you start talking about transgenderism. But if we completely eliminate the trans from the conversation altogether, we should be able to come to an understanding of what exactly gender is, independent of like choice or conscious decision or self-identity, right? Like
All right.
society has an idea of what a gender is. We know what a woman is. 99.9% of the time, we're going to get that right. If we see a woman, we'll say that's a woman, right? Like, and we know like even beyond like her sex, right? We're not looking to check for a vagina or any of those things. We just kind of have an idea of what these things are, and we would say that, right?
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Mind you, just hold on. I'll need to quickly pick up this food. But yeah, I'll answer that in a moment. Just hold on.
All right. Okay. There's no way.
I should have answered before I left. I've forgotten what you asked again.
It's fine. I was saying that, like, independent of expression and all of that stuff, the society can have a definition or we have an understanding of what a woman is, right? Like, that has nothing to do with a person's, like, personal choice or discretionary identification. It has everything to do with just what we as society know to be the truth, and that is that, like, adult females are typically women, right? Like, in 99.9% of the cases, we're going to know this person, a grown adult female, is a woman. Like that part, I don't have to wait for confirmation for that. We both know that to be true. And then the secondary
Yeah.
part is that there is, as fits within the definition of gender that you provided, like this sort of societal expectation or social expectations for what fall in the categories of these things. Again, this is not biological but social. So, and you'll find that it varies from culture to culture. So, for example, women culturally in the United States obviously typically do the cooking, and this is not just in the United States, this is in most of the world. Women do the cooking, men were the providers and the workers and did the other stuff outside of the home, whereas women typically made the home. That was a woman thing, that was a thing assigned to womanhood. And then manhood had a lot to do with being strong, being able to provide, being the protectors and things like that. And so there are cases
Yeah.
in which you would
Yeah,
have.
yeah, but it's not. That's not necessarily the only case. So,
No, no, no. I'm not. I
women.
didn't make this. I didn't make the statement that it's the only case, nor did I make the statement that it can't. There can be no deviance. It's what I'm saying is typically this is what society has done. These are the typical assignments, right? I'm just making sure we're establishing the base groundwork before we get into the divergence. Like I feel like you're so ready for a debate, and I'm just trying to make sure that we at least have an agreement on all of the foundational stuff, so that when we actually get into a debate, if there is one, I don't really even think there is any room for a debate, then at least we have all of our groundwork and definitions stated, so that way we don't have to retread any of this, if that
Yeah, I
makes
was thinking that
sense.
this would probably be pretty short, especially if we agree with each other on nearly everything. But
Well,
although, except for the main question, but continue.
all right.
I'll let you continue.
Okay, so then if that's the case, then it means that it sounds well, we can recognize that sometimes society will have expectations for what a man or what a woman is, and even though someone is an adult female or adult male, that we might say that they are not a woman or a man, right? For example, like if you have a person, an adult male who like kind of refuses to do anything with himself, and kind of like rejects or neglects responsibilities in a way, then people will say you're not being a real man, right? Or if we see someone who fulfills the characteristics that we assigned to adult manhood, then we'll say this person is being manly, right? But then there are times in which someone doesn't fulfill those things, and we will say this person is not a real man, or this person is still a boy, even though they are like 21 years of age, right? Or maybe 23 years of age, but living like a boy. Have you ever experienced that or witnessed that, or do you understand that to be a societal thing that occurs every now and then?
Yeah, it's what people say. I think it's completely unconstructive, especially since it's pretty much a bullying tactic that people use all the time. It's always somebody else um, trying to get the other person to, well, trying to control the other person through their words. You're not a man. You need to do the thing that I tell you to do, otherwise you're not a man. Which is it's not nice. But yeah.
Yeah, it can be not nice. Although sometimes I would say I don't know that it's necessarily a matter of bullying, because right, like we can like there could be a time where like a father is doing that to motivate his son to be productive in life, right? And it's not a matter of the father trying to bully the son, but more so a matter of the father recognizing that like society has these expectations for what should happen with a young man.
It's the wrong way to go about it, in my opinion.
I
But
got you,
yeah, I
but
can understand it.
sure. And maybe even if it's not a thing that they're saying directly to the child, right? Because I could see how that could be somewhat impactful. But we can understand that this is an ideology that society can have, right? Like in reference to like what a person is or what a man is and so on and so forth. Whereas maybe he won't ever say it to the son so as to make sure that he's able to maintain his influence with that son, but he can have that purpose within his mindset or within his heart where he says, this, my son is not being a man. My son is not being manly, right? And so then maybe that might motivate him to want to try to push his son to be more whatever society expects of him, to be more productive in the way that typically men are productive in that society. And likewise with the woman, the same kind of thing, right? But so these are things that wouldn't matter a bit, wouldn't be anything regarding transness, wouldn't be anything about self-expression per se. It would be, or conscious expression. It would just be more about a person observing someone who is not fulfilling the roles typically assigned with that gender, and therefore saying that someone is less than because of that. And this is not something that is completely uncommon in society, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I mean, I guess that's all the preliminaries. Do you have anything you feel like we should go through, we'll go on, or do you think we could just go ahead and get right into it now?
Well, one thing that I want to say is that there's a lot of social things, right, that have been brought from like we can't get right into it, but there is one thing I want to bring up, and that is that I feel like gender is thrown around too much, especially like currently right now in social sciences. It's like it's something that is said all the time, especially when like you could use sex better. One thing that I find is that people who want to utilize gender kind of want to use it as a replacement term for sex, and I just don't think that's correct. I always try to be as correct as I can be. Sometimes I'm ignorant. Sometimes I'm, you know, stubborn, pig-headed, and you know, sometimes I'm wrong and I don't want to admit it. It's the pride, and and so you know, I'll fight with people over it. But the my whole thing is that I think that there's a lot of people out there who generally don't want to accept truth. Well, not so much the truth, but the consensus, the scientific consensus, and the and things that make more sense and is more correct in that regard. Of course, I'm mostly basing this off science because that's probably the only objective thing we can utilize. Social sciences tries to do it as best they can. They use the scientific method as well, but with it kind of fails to get there, mostly because of the nature of social sciences. But they do their best. Yeah, that's all I want to say about that. I just think gender's used a little bit too much. I think there's way too much politicization of it. I think there's a lot of groups of people who are propping up other groups of people, so then they can get their voices heard, so then they can make money off them, that kind of stuff. But anyways, this is all like a lot of random stuff that we can probably discuss in between. So yeah, let's get right into it.
Okay, so when a person starts wanting to, like, when a person is transgender, right? Like, the idea about transgenderism would be a person that maybe recognizes what the gender roles associated with that individual, like the gender roles associated with with that sex, right? First off, you made a statement earlier where you said that you believe that gender almost doesn't exist without sex, right? Like these, like they're necessarily like tied together, in the sense
Yeah,
that,
I'd say so.
and I totally agree with you there. I would say that gender is just a representation of the traits assigned typically to the sexes, right? So you have a male, you have a female, and there are gender roles that in the same way that male and female is a dichotomy, genders are a dichotomy, woman and man, that are direct reflections of what those sex, the characteristics assigned to that sex, right? So we have no disagreement there. I would say that when a person recognizes maybe that they don't fit within whatever is typically assigned to their given sex, then that person would possibly identify as a transgender, right? Where a person that is a male, but for whatever reason feels like they more closely identify with the internal mechanisms of whatever it is to be female, then that would be transgenderism. And this has nothing to do with sex or biology. This is all social, and them wanting to identify as the things typically assigned with the opposite sex and opposite gender. Does that make sense?
Yeah, generally that's the goal that they have. Yep.
Okay. So then, in that case, if society has these expectations about how a person would present themselves, and what the social norms are of the two sexes, and a person chooses to exemplify all of the things from the gender, from the opposite gender, then from their biological sex, anyways. Assuming that there's a pairing, obviously, between male and man and female and woman, then at that point, then society would identify them as transgender. And so then in that case, if a person is fulfilling all of the roles of the opposite gender, then it would make sense that that person would be considered transgender, right?
Well,
and tell me where you disagree.
The interesting part here is that, sorry, I'm going to be eating for a bit. the society aspect of it. I don't think society knows. Honestly, I mean that's why I guess a lot of people are trying to spread awareness for it. Oh, it's always on TV. It's always in media.
What
I
part
see it
doesn't
all the time.
society know?
Transgenders.
Wait,
I think you'll find that a lot of people don't know what transgenders are.
so if a male, who is wearing women's clothing and makeup and high heels, but 6'6",
They might know them as transvestites,
sure.
but I think you'll find like a lot of society doesn't know what transgenders are.
I don't.
I think that's just a time thing.
I think as heavy-handed as that agenda has been, I don't think there's very much of American society left that doesn't at least know what it is, even if they haven't met a person that is transgender. I mean, there's been literal legislation passed specifically about which bathrooms they can use. And there's been total fights about all that stuff.
But how many people do you think look at that? How many people do you think read legislation?
No, you don't have to read the legislation. All you would have to do is hear the surrounding conversation around the legislation, right? So if you have Fox News that's intentionally demonizing an entire piece of legislation about transgenderism, then the idea that people would be watching Fox News and wouldn't understand what transgenderism is that's laughable, right? Like most people haven't read any of the legislation.
Then you better laugh then, because like the problem is that the media and news and everything is only viewed by a very small minority of people. Not many people watch news.
Is that true?
Yeah, if you have a look at the ratings and numbers that like all the medias and groups get, it's a relatively small portion of the population.
Let me see. Fox News averages 2.5 million viewers per day.
Yeah, and they might be unique. They might be different. You don't know. It's kind of like, they might talk about transgenderism. They might not. Depending on the segment. Like I think, like at least with the people that I've talked to, RL, this is completely anecdotal, but and I'm also not American, so we've got different news down here. People that I've talked to, they've never even heard of transgenderism.
Okay, I can't answer. I won't engage with that. I'm sorry, unfortunately, because your anecdote literally means absolutely nothing to me. I can't interact with it. Right. What I can do is kind of look. Yeah, I got to look at the data, look at whatever. Right. And what I see right now is that Fox News in the United States averages 2.5 million viewers. Clearly, they've obviously talked about the trans issues quite a bit because it's actually been dominating our political conversations, right? It's absolutely within the Overton window.
That's the other catch as well.
Is something that the idea that this is something that is like obscure or esoteric is just absolutely unfounded. You have to know that.
Well, you and I are both in some form of.
I'm not talking about me. What I did was just talk about the numbers: 2.5 million people. I'm not a part of. No,
I know. But you got to know that we're also a part of a niche. We're part of this
again.
niche.
What I did was completely distance this thing from your or my anecdotal experience and looked at the data of 2.5 million viewers averaging on Fox daily and started talking about that. I'm not interested in talking about your experience, your anecdotes. My anecdotes, what I'm looking at is the data and recognizing that this is something that has been dominating our political conversations, that we've had to have all of these conversations about schools because when Obama was in office, he actually made a rule that all schools had to allow for transgender people to use the bathrooms for which they were assigned, or which they identified. Like that was a rule that happened during Obama's presidency, which of course caused all of the various schools to start having conversations with students about what transgender people could be in bathrooms and so on and so forth. On top of this being completely a pop issue, we've had obviously trans shows, we've had all of these things, and it's been a hotly debated topic in the United States. The idea that the average person doesn't know what transgenderism is absolutely laughable. You have to understand that. Now, notice in that, I'm not talking about your personal experience. My anecdotes any of those things. I'm just talking about the reasons to believe in all honesty, that the average person is completely aware of what transgenderism is, and the idea that there are large amounts of people who are still uninformed about, like, not having met people or interacted with trans people, but like that there's a large amount of people that literally don't understand what transgenderism is in 2021 in the United States of America is absolutely laughable.
That's fine. Laugh about it all you want there, because I think you'll find that the ignorance of these topics is something is quite real.
Okay. Yeah, listen, if you want to believe that, I'm going to leave you to that. I'm not going to try to convince you of the facts there. All right, so then the idea becomes, though, society can recognize that there can be a person who is transgender who recognizes that, like, or who feels that they're in a gender that is very different than their biological, like, than what it would be typically assigned to their biological sex, right? Like, there is a like we obviously have that detailed in, like, by, like, the APA, and psychologists are clearly recognizing what it is. We have legislation that, like, forces every, like, government body. We have literal federal legislation that says that you can't discriminate based off of someone's transness or not, or whatever. We have state legislation that, like, insists that trans people are allowed to use showers and things like that are typically assigned to non-trans women and things like that. So then clearly society has developed some sort of understanding of what transness is in order to create provisions for transness, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Of course, there's always going to be the splinter groups here and there who, not so much splinter groups, but groups here and there who are pushing for more rights for the people. They've always existed. Like there a lot of minorities trying to get more rights, and whether they require those rights is all up to government and legislation and all that. And they deemed
And
it
the votes of the
correct,
people.
so they did it. Yeah. The representative, the representatives of the rest of the society. They decide whether or not it's required or not, and they have.
Okay, so then if that's the case, then how do we still maintain an ideology? Or do you so then you would recognize then that if a person, a trans person, identifies as a woman, then that would and chose to practice or express themselves in ways that are typically associated with the opposite sex, then we could understand that that person is a woman, right?
No,
Then what would be the difference?
there's a big difference.
Okay, what is it?
Generally, to be a woman, like there's traits that you can't have. You can have like a man who acts like a girl, who is very girly, long hair, let's say. Maybe likes to wear dresses, likes to drink, feminine drinks. Lots of different. Likes to cook and clean, and might be gay, so likes looking after their man, that kind of stuff. But it doesn't change, like, just because they have those characteristics will not change the fact that biologically they are of that group
You just brought up
of man.
biologically when you just said that gender is entirely non-scientific. So biology
Yeah,
has nothing to do with gender.
yeah. So the root, the base, the thing that we both agree on, the base is that thing. It's something that is objective, scientifically.
Wait, you're talking about
You,
sex, but we're talking about gender right now.
right, but you got okay. All right. This is where the wordplay gets in, where it becomes less of an argument of what is actually true and what is, and it's going to become more of a, well, you're not defining things correctly.
No, no, no,
So
no. I'm not trying to, like, change you or charge your definitions.
so
I entirely agreed with your definitions that you gave earlier. The thing is
so
now that you're trying to redefine things yourself because you recognize
no,
that
I'm
your
not
definition.
redefining.
Okay, so then if you agree, then you would understand that gender has literally nothing to do with biology. Yet when we were talking about a transgender
Hang on,
person,
that goes completely opposite to what you said. You
excuse
said
me?
that you said that sex is the basis for gender. You said that
No,
earlier.
I'm sorry, you're right. Maybe I shouldn't use the phrase it has literally nothing to do with, but we know that gender is distinct from biology, right?
yeah, distinct enough to give it its own term, yes.
You
But
said it's
it doesn't.
completely
It
not
doesn't mean that it doesn't.
scientific. You said it was
But
based on
it's
social
like,
norms. You said it was
but have a listen to this. Have a listen
societally
to this.
imposed.
Like pasta is a type of noodle, but it's not a noodle, is it?
Isn't it a noodle?
No, it's pasta.
But pasta is a noodle. You got to come up with a better
No,
example
it's
than that.
not. Like I'm telling you, there are different. There are things that make it different, right?
Excuse me?
There are aspects of it that make it different. So
No.
if we have a look at
No, you're just wrong. A pasta is a noodle.
yeah, like I said, that pasta is a type of noodle, but it's not a noodle. Like people know pasta as pasta. People know noodles as noodles. It's different because of where.
Wait, no. Any person eating pasta knows that part of the pasta is the noodles.
No, but like, okay, there's different types of pasta that is not noodle-like at all. Spaghetti is very noodle-like, but then you have like penne. Is it penne? What is not?
Let me look at penne pasta. Those are still noodles. Like what are you talking about?
No, absolutely not. What are you telling me? Like, tell me a characteristic of a noodle.
Okay, let's look at what a noodle is. I don't want to do this with you, bro. You know what a noodle is, and pasta is clearly noodles.
No, it's not. There's so many different pastas out there that you would definitely not call a noodle. There are pastas like, have you ever seen a tortellini? Like tortellini is not a noodle, but it's a type of pasta.
Oh, sure. You know what? That's a good point. Sure. Okay, let me just Google.
But I think I'm losing my point here. The point that I'm making is that we have like basic, like, to be honest, it probably is almost not relevant at all now that I realize it. But there's bases that we derive everything off. Like, you know, the religious. This is something a little bit more relevant. Religious people, they base like the whole world off the conception of God, and then science, you know, uses a different conception. But we all have our bases, and we all have things that we accept, and that we have to accept for things to move past it and move further. And one of those things that we do for gender is that we have to accept sex. If we don't accept sex, then gender is completely like, it just is a nonsense term. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't define anything.
Well,
we have to with gender, you have to take sex's masculinity, femininity that comes from people's genetics, because a lot of this is from your genetics.
No, but no. That's not true. When we start talking about the societal norms, those things aren't necessarily genetic. Like,
but they're not always societal norms.
Well, a lot of them, like when we start talking about womanhood, when it comes to like things like cooking, that is not genetic. That has to do with like societal like impositions, right? Or
all right, here's something that you'll have to agree with.
When it comes to things like playing with Barbie dolls and things like that, that's not societal. Like that's something that that's not genetic. That's something that's societal. Like the type of toys and the type of like activities that little girls are typically like taught to do. Those things. Oh shoot. Yeah, so when you start talking about like some of the societal impositions, like those things aren't necessarily biological, right? Like when you start talking about like men being like the ones to repair cars, it's not a genetic thing. That's a societal thing. Women cooking, it's not a genetic thing. It's a societal thing. Like playing hopscotch, that's not a biological thing. It's a genetic thing, right? And like a lot of our activities and things like that, while there can be biological like they could have been influenced by biology, but clearly people of different sexes can still participate or do those things.
Well, that's the thing that I want to bring up now, is why is it that we categorize ourselves pretty much? Like, why is it that kids will move towards certain toys? Why is it that kids like doing certain things when they get to a certain age? Why is it that we shift, like we move ourselves into these to sort ourselves into these two categories? Why is it that we do that naturally?
Well, I don't know how I can't say for sure that we do those things naturally. It's that things are
we do. It's quite apparent in society.
No, if some of these things are literally like societally imposed. For example, you'll see like for example, parents will immediately like they'll make a boys' room. They'll make their child's room blue, right? Typically, if it's a boy. And if it's a girl, then they'll make the room pink. They will automatically give the child like girl toys from the time that they're born, right? Like, okay, I'm going to give you dolls, whereas they won't give that to a boy. The commercials and things that are aimed at boys are typically going to be specifically in one way, where the toys and commercials that are aimed at girls are going to be an entirely different way.
I
These
think you're
things
looking at this
start.
from the wrong way
Hold
around.
on, no, I'm not. And then secondly,
No, you
I'm
definitely are.
definitely
I'll
not.
explain.
And secondly, children a lot of times will use their parents as models, and then they will begin to imitate some of the characteristics and behaviors of their parents. So while I do recognize that there are like things like agreeableness and aggression that I would say that are probably going to be more genetically imposed, but a lot of the activities associated with womanhood and things like that are not. In fact, I can't really think of anything that are really associated with womanhood that are necessarily from biology.
So, with the toys aspect, they don't make the toys to create men, to turn them into men
That's not what I
or
said.
boys.
Are you arguing because I didn't say anything like that? Never did I say they make the toys to turn them into men. What are you talking about?
So, where's the societal thing come from then?
What I said was that
Why are they boys' toys?
I said they market toys towards
Why?
boys because society has an expectation of what type of toys boys will play with, and as a result of that, they market those things towards boys
So why aren't they dolls instead,
because
rather
society
than like trucks?
because what society has always done is like made toys and things more associated with things that are associated with adult, like what adulthood would be. For example, with women, with your little girls, I'm sorry, what they'll do is they have like things like cooking sets and doll houses and what's it called, little baby dolls, and like just yeah, anyway, all of these kind of toys that are more like domestically driven. That's just those are the type of toys. Whereas you look at whenever it comes to boys, it always comes with not always, but more frequently, you'll have toys that are more fantastical, like Army Man or He Man or freaking I don't know, super fast race cars and helicopters and sometimes magic toys and things like that that are more fantastical. Like those are the type of things that we typically gear towards the different sexes.
You don't think there's any biological reason for it?
Tell me what the biological reason is why we need to why we would be showing boys Power Rangers and not girls.
Well, it's actually really quite simple. Um, a lot of social scientists have talked about this a lot, and that is the aspect that men and women, even boys and girls, even just genetically, we're predisposed to certain traits and aspects. There's certain things that we enjoy and like to do. To give you an example of one of them is um, men like to fight and win. They like to dominate. They like to they like to work. They like to build. There's a lot of practical on hand, like hands-on things that they like to get their hands on and do. And women, and this, mind you, this is not necessarily the same for everyone. Of course, people are different. It could be the complete opposite for another group of kids. But like this is something that has been observed and seen, and that is that like women will enjoy socializing and getting into the emotional aspect of characters and toys and
Okay,
other
and
people, like
I hear all
people.
of these things
There's
you're
the whole
saying. You're gonna
there's
have
this
to
but
prove to
hang
me.
on fanatic,
But
let
just
me
really
finish.
quickly, is any of this going to is are you going to tell me that none of these things that you're describing, you don't have to go any further. I know the ideas you're representing. Are you telling me that there's literally zero social implications to any of these things that have that of these habits that you're referring to, right? So there's no toys that are going. There's no social societal stigma associated with any type of boys that would be participating in these things, right? Like none of these things could be at all societally imposed. It's all 100% biological, right? You're telling me there are no emotional boys that would be like chastised for displaying too much emotion or being called little girls for displaying too much emotion. Like you're not telling me none of those things exist, because unless you're telling me these things are just how do you even study these things in a vacuum? How can you say that these
Um,
things aren't at all
there's a
societally
bunch of
imposed?
There's a bunch of them. You could just Google why do boys like boy toys? Why do girls like girl toys? You can just give it a quick Google, and there'll be a lot of different papers about it.
Sure, but do any of these papers? So you're telling me these papers were 100% controlled to make sure that none of this is societally driven, right? Like none of this
Well,
has
they'll
to do.
do. Well, of course, aspects of it are societally driven, but that's not even what makes it wrong, or it's not even bad data with that. Society has been driven by our different roles that we have taken upon us. Like we are molded by it to the extent that we are now. Like some societies are a little bit more. If you have a look at it, some societies are a whole lot more neutral than other societies are. Like some parents will be extremely stuck in what they believe is masculine and feminine, and will try and force their kids to act masculine and feminine. And then you have other societies where, to give an example, is like some of the Nordic countries. I think it was Norway or Sweden, one of them, that they were extremely neutral, extremely open to how their kids developed, and their society is now that, and it like just biologically,
No,
men and
again,
women have moved into different roles. Like you'll find that there are more women in nursing and more men in construction in these societies. Like
but
they're more
wait, but
engineers and
you can't say that that has nothing to do with like biology or society, because even in those studies where they're raising
no,
their
it
children,
does have to do with
hold on,
biology.
because even in those studies where they're raising these children in these different ways, you still like they still have the models of their parents to reflect on, and by the time that when they were doing this free society in which they're raising these children in these ways, they already still have like these obvious gender roles are still going to dominate the vast majority of their media. Still, most of their parents already fit within these categories, right? Like, so even if they did do this, the idea that like some of this stuff isn't like going to be like there's not going to be already biases like within these children because of like the things and models that they've seen from other adults. It's just that's
All right,
laughable, right?
answer this for me, Fanatic. If you think in a vacuum, if there was two kids, right, in a vacuum, then they're raised by like two, like we'll just say we'll have two of the opposite sex, two men and then two women, right? And they raised two children, um, a boy and a girl, right? And let's say we have like 10,000 of these to stay consistent. Do you really think that if they were given the completely neutral option throughout all the whole childhood, that um, those kids would play with different dolls, or would they play with the same dolls, like the same toys?
Hmm.
Like if given the choice.
Yeah, I would imagine if there was like literally zero societal implications, I don't know, maybe I would have. I don't know what the exact numbers would be, but I would imagine that it would start to deviate significantly from what we have now. I don't think children are like biologically driven to playing with certain toys. But hold on, wait. But this brings me to a really important part. Let's go ahead and give that to you. Let's assume that all of this stuff is happening biologically. How do you explain to people who don't biologically feel compelled to participate with the same toys as the other typical children?
Yeah. So as you said earlier, there are some boys who are a little bit more emotional, and they might want to they might want to engage with people more than they want to engage with things.
Okay, but what about the ones who would rather play with the other dolls? Or what about the ones who would literally feel like and identify with all of the things typically associated with womanhood? Like, would you say that that's biologically different for those cases? Or what would you say is the cause of that?
Um. Well, I mean, like I'm not a biologist, social scientist. I don't know what the cause is. I can only tell you what I've read and
Do
what I've
you
seen.
think it's a little bit laughable to say like to appeal to biology when it's suiting your argument, and then when I try to use your argument against you, to then like reflect retreat to I'm just not a biologist, so I don't know?
Well, no, like okay, so if oh my gosh, I can't. That's such a ridiculous thing to say.
Is it?
Most of, like, yeah, because I'm telling, like, like I can tell you better sources and places to go for these things. I'm not the best person to ask like why we are different, like why we're different in these regards. I can only tell you things that I've read and seen that a lot of other people who have used the scientific method and use social sciences and other methods to try and determine these differences and try and rationale these differences. I can only tell you to go over there to check them out. Like I can't really give you the correct answers for this. I'll only make myself look like an idiot.
Well,
I all I'm going to tell you is that if you want to look at if you want to look at why we're different in those regards, there you're going to have to look at a lot of these Nordic studies. You're going to have to look at them,
right?
Because
were the Nordic studies able to control for environment such that we can say that environment had no impact on the development of these children, or parental models had no impact on the development of these children? Is that what you're trying to claim?
No, I think it'd be impossible to try and do that. Like it's you
So
can't
then
have
why are
like a
you-
child. You can't have a child in a no. Hang on. But don't start going. No, well then how can you really be sure that this is correct? We're gonna use the best methods we can.
Wait,
and
no.
the
Wait,
thing
no,
is-
no, no.
and-
Your
and
method
Fanatiq,
is trying its
Fanatiq,
best to
there are-
dismiss the environmental
Fanatiq,
influence altogether. Unless you're conceding to me
things known
right
as
now,
meta-studies.
unless you're conceding, I know what a meta study is. A meta study is a study of a whole bunch of studies, right? Like
Yes.
that's what a meta study is. But guess what? Unless any of those individual studies were able to control for environmental factors such that we can completely rule out environment, then all the meta study is going to do is just give us a broader understanding of what all the other independent studies are doing, right? And there is no meta study that is basically trying to imply that the toys that children are attracted to are biologically driven.
Well, how wrong you'll be then? How wrong you'll be? Like
Okay,
if you actually have a look at these studies,
So-
you'll find that
Okay,
like
so
this.
just to be sure though, so now, since you're really depending on biology here, when I'm asking you, how can you be sure, or what's causing these children that are obviously deviating from whatever biology should be dictating, what's causing that? You have no answer to that.
I already gave you an answer to it.
Your
said
answer was, I
they
don't
could-
know.
No, the answer I gave you was that they're probably more emotional. They've probably got more traits about them that are feminine than they do masculine. At least in their development stage when they're a child.
Oh.
Maybe later on they'll gain more masculine traits as they get older.
What about the ones
Like,
that
I know-
we
I know-
obviously
I know
recognize?
quite a
I don't
few.
care about your anecdote, but what about the ones that we're positive that this doesn't happen for? What
Sorry?
about the ones, the adults, who didn't get more masculine when they got older, in fact,
Mhm.
started expressing themselves like in more feminine ways, even more so? What about them?
Well, what about them? Like, yeah, they've
Sounds like a kink in your
stayed more-
model, right?
No, not really. Like, how's it a kink at all? If we're trying to find out what people are driven to, like, of course, there's going to be deviations. There's not everyone like we're not robots. We're not going to be like boy toy good,
Sure,
woman toy bad,
I got
or
you.
woman toy good.
And so, if
Like,
we were to
it's-
come up with a name for those deviations, do you think that name could possibly be transgenderism?
I don't think so.
You don't think so. Society
No.
thinks so, but you're just saying you know better.
No, I don't think so. I think, unfortunately, like this is the whole aspect of that this is the whole crux of the whole argument that we've got here, and that is that transgenders, like a lot of okay. So I've had this argument a lot with people, and there is some things that I can accept and some things that I can't. One of them is that yes, you're a very feminine man.
Mhm.
Yes, you are homosexual, right? But I
Mhm.
can't get over the fence to the part where it says, you're a woman now. Like I can't get over that because there is the fence is sex, the wall is sex, whatever way.
Not necessarily, not according
to.
to your definitions that you gave me earlier.
But you got to remember that being feminine doesn't make you a female.
No, it does not. It does not. You can be a feminine male, right? And no one's talking about Like, again, the word is, when we were talking about transgenderism, it's not about sex, it's about gender. And so you wouldn't be feminine and become a female. You could be feminine and become a woman. Those are different things.
No, because under womanhood, like under being a woman, is the sex, the
No,
sexual
I'm
term.
sorry, because you said, once again, I wrote this down, you said gender isn't scientific, when we already know biological sex is scientific. So since gender isn't scientific, you can't then say that under womanhood is the sex, because sex is scientific, and you said gender isn't scientific, so gender
what is
isn't
sex then?
sex.
What is a woman then? Like, if they're not a female,
So I would say,
if they are not,
I'll answer
like,
the question
come
for
on.
you. Sure. Okay, sure. You asked me what a woman is. A woman, I would say, is one, not scientific, and I would say it is what people. It can be what people want to represent themselves, and I would say a woman is someone who takes.
It's already a terrible term then.
Okay, I'm saying a woman takes the social norms from the female sex, right, and has more femininity. Do you disagree with that?
Wait, a woman.
Here, I'll read it
takes
one more
more
time.
from
Try
the
not to
sex
interject.
rather
I'm
than
gonna
a
read.
female.
I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna read it one more time. I'm gonna explain it one more time. A woman, one, is not scientific. It's more socially driven, and I would say it can be what someone wants to represent themselves. And I can say a woman takes social norms from the female sex and expresses more femininity. Do you disagree with that?
Yeah, I do. I don't think it's a very good term.
Well, that's
I don't think
crazy.
it's they take.
That's
I don't think it's they take characteristics.
That's your definition. That
I
was
think
your
that is what they are.
definition. That was your definition that you
No, I
gave
don't
me.
think that was my
I
definition.
literally read it just now. I'm sorry. What you said specifically was gender isn't scientific. Gender is what people want to represent themselves. They take social norms from the two sexes, which can change over time, and then you said they express masculinity or femininity. That's what you said earlier. So your definition, and I
Female is not a
parroted it
gender
back.
term. It's a sex term.
I was talking about woman thus far, and I read it back
Woman,
to you.
yes,
And when I
that is
read
as
it
well.
back to you, nope, you said it for sure. Gender isn't scientific. Woman is a gender; it is not a sex. Female is the sex.
Wait, since when is woman a gender?
When I asked you earlier, after you read your definition that you agreed to, that I wrote down, you said that woman, and I asked you if
Well,
you
I disagree with it now then.
Okay, so you're just backtracking. So then what that seems like, and I give you all the power to do so. That's your prerogative. But you have to recognize,
that's okay. If you
I got
if
you,
you
but
wanna
what,
debate
but,
me,
no,
we
I'm not,
can,
I'm not
but-
debate broing you. I'm not debate broing you. What I'm doing is I wrote down your definition because what it seems to me is very often when you're having these conversations with people about these subjects is that what people do is they like their definitions and they understand what it means, but then when they start arguing, then they start being intentionally illogical so as to prevent, so that they don't have to actually commit to their own words. And so I wrote this
Fanatic,
down from the
100%,
beginning.
Fanatic, let me tell you this then. Then if that is what I said, then I was 100% wrong, because what is known and defined as a woman is an adult female human being. And if we go to look at what a female is, like, we can have a look at definitions here. I just quickly Googled it for you because I don't know why you're stuck on this.
Well, I'm stuck on your definition, using your definition to have a conversation?
Yes, then my definition is wrong then. Then it's wrong, and I don't give a fuck if I'm wrong, because this is what is actually correct. Female, or denoting the sex that can bear offspring, produce eggs, distinguished biologically by production of gametes ova, which can be fertilized by male gametes. I don't know how to pronounce that. And woman comes from that. Woman, an adult female human being. So tell me where it is, how it's a gender term and not a sex term.
Okay. Do you think that's the only definition? Because you know, if we just pull up Merriam-Webster right now, there are other definitions, right?
This is the only one that matters to me. It makes the most sense.
Wait. No. So now you're being hold on. Now you're being really selective about your definition. So now you're not just making an appeal to a definition, you're making an appeal to an exclusive definition, despite the fact that there are other definitions present.
Yeah, you can use it in other ways.
No,
Like
no, 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 no. I'm not saying to use
but it
that.
doesn't
I'm not.
change the fact
I'm not
that
talking
this
about.
is
Hold
the
on. I'm
main
not
one.
talking about using that definition in other ways. I'm talking about the
Oh man,
existence.
I didn't think
I'm.
this argument
Hold on.
would
I'm
turn into
not.
this.
I'm not
This is
talking.
really debate, bro.
Okay, sure. I'm not talking about using a definition in other ways. I'm talking about the existence of other definitions from the same source.
Of course, other definitions can
So
exist.
why
It
are you?
doesn't.
So then why are you appealing to that definition exclusively?
What do you mean? It is the definition. Like it's a.
There are
It's
multiple
the
definitions.
right, but this one is the one that makes the most sense. It is closest. It is like you got to remember when we use terms and things, they have to be things that we agree with and that we understand. Like to say, well, there are other definitions for these things, right? Yeah, okay, so there may be, but I'm like
No, within.
when
I'm
it
saying
comes to
no from the
when it
same
comes to
source.
what you're asking me when you say, "Boom man, what is a woman?" I will always take you to this term. I don't care about the other ones. I'm telling
No,
you, this
but
is
you
what I think it
didn't.
is.
You didn't take it to that term earlier. You gave
Yes,
your
I
own.
did.
You
Oh,
gave
earlier,
you
yeah,
gave
earlier.
me a
I was wrong
definition.
then.
Right, okay, I get it.
I was wrong then.
You're only saying you're wrong now because you recognize that your definition actually creates contradictions if you try to maintain your obtuse ideology.
It's not obtuse at all.
It
I
is.
like
It literally
if what I
you
said
literally
earlier, if
contradicted
that's what I
yourself.
said,
You're
if that's
contradicting
what
yourself now, are you not? You
that's
literally
okay.
want to change.
I will contradict myself and be wrong.
Okay.
Like I will be wrong in the past. I'd rather be correct right now.
Okay,
I'd rather be that.
I hear that, but what it sounds to me is it's not about you wanting to be wrong or be right now. It's about you wanting to be selective about which definition you're willing
No,
to adhere
not
to
at all.
in order to make sure that that you can try to remain consistent because you recognize that within your definitions that you gave earlier, you realized there was an ideology. I mean that there was a contradiction. And I asked you, I wrote down your definition. I asked you about different applications.
So what was my definition again? Let's hear it one last time.
Okay, let's read it one more time. Sure. Your definition was you said gender isn't scientific. Gender is what people want to represent themselves. You said they take social norms from the two sexes, which can change over time. And then you said that they express masculinity or femininity. Those were the things you said.
Right. What has that got to do with a woman? What has that got to do with a woman?
Woman is a gender.
No, it's not.
Okay.
It's an adult female human being. And female human beings
Is that the only definition?
is a sex.
Is that the only definition?
Well, I think this is where we've finished up, isn't it? I think this is pretty much the crux of the whole argument that we're never going to get past. So
I guess
what else would you like to discuss?
Just to make sure. So the crux is that you're saying that only one definition exists, or any other definition other than the one that you're reading right now, you refuse to acknowledge.
I don't understand why you're trying to make it out like this. I don't understand what you're trying to do here with this. I've given you the definition that I subscribe to, that I believe, and
right.
I think makes the most sense.
Sure, I got you.
Right? And it's something that has existed for existed for hundreds of years,
right,
in the dictionary.
And you refuse to
This is
acknowledge
something
any other definitions.
No, but hang on, Fanatiq as well. Please give me a society right now that would not agree with this definition. Please give me a society that does not agree with that.
So just to be clear, once again, so you are saying that this is the definition that you're going to go with, and you refuse to acknowledge any other existing definitions, right?
It's not that I need to acknowledge it. It's that I've given you a definition, the one that I subscribe to. So what is the issue?
Okay, sure. You've given me right.
Hang on, Fanatiq.
You didn't. No. Because you keep saying you gave me a definition. You didn't say you gave me the definition. You gave me a definition. So then that means by you saying that, are you willing to acknowledge that there are other definitions that exist?
There can be, but they're not relevant.
They're not relevant to who?
Why would they be?
They're not relevant to who?
To me and to
you.
Society.
So you're saying again,
when you're oh my gosh,
you can't say that it's not relevant to society when society.
I don't know why you want to pigeonhole me like this?
Well, the reason why I'm pigeonholing you is because I wanted to, because you said earlier.
You want me to agree with your
earlier before we had this conversation.
So you can say
you said
woman is
earlier.
Also a gender. That's what you want to do.
You said earlier before we had this conversation that whenever people start debating, they start going off of emotions and they don't use facts and they don't use logic. And so I've only done facts, logic, and used your arguments specifically and stuck to your words so as to prevent us from getting off any rabbit holes. That's why I asked for definitions from the very beginning. And now you're pivoting away from your definition and subscribing to a specific definition
I know
when
what
there
you're
is the
trying to
existence
do.
of other definitions there
Have a
that will
listen,
clearly
Fanatiq.
talk about other things other than the one that you're talking about. But you want to
You're
subscribe
trying
to
to
yours
reach the third
exclusively.
definition. You're trying to reach the third definition here, distinctively feminine in nature, and you're trying to then tie that to gender, and you're going to try and use that as a way to say, well, gender is also defined as woman, and if gender is also defined as woman, that means that trans women are also women. That's what you're trying to do, and I disagree. I don't think that's correct at all. I think that takes way too many leaps. And not only that, it ignores the primary definition.
So when I look up the word gender, right?
Is that what you? No, just answer me. Is that what you want to do? Is that your whole argument? Because if we're gonna talk about this for the next 20, 30 minutes, like I want to know, is that what you want to do? You want to use the distinctively feminine nature, right? You want to use that feminine term to then tie it to gender and then bring it to trans. Is that what you're going to do?
Well, I think that's what the word means. Sure.
Okay,
that's
then I disagree with you, and I think we're done with this.
Okay, as long as look, all I did, man. I don't know why you got so upset because it's not like I was.
I'm not upset.
Well, or I don't know why you got so bothered. Clearly, all I did was took your definition and asked you to define it. I didn't deviate from your definition. You're now deviating from your definition because
That's fine.
Because it's inconvenient for you. So it doesn't sound like you're being genuine or you're being honest, even with yourself. Because what you're doing is you're now modifying your argument so as to, even though you would readily accept it,
even
though you readily accepted it, I made sure I confirmed it through multiple different examples. You were perfectly willing to accept it then, and it's just now that argument, I've logically gone down a deductive train that has taken us to this point where there's a contradiction, and now you want to pivot.
Your logic and deductive train puts you is only one track, my guy. Like you ignore all the other aspects of it. Like you like the thing that I don't understand about all these things is that when especially with this here definition is that these things are all what is considered a woman, right? Which means that you don't then take the feminine nature, which is what you're going to do, distinctively feminine nature, and then you turn it into, okay, and now that means gender, and now that means trans women are also women. No, that's not how it works at all. Because what a woman is, primarily, is an adult female person. And primarily, that is sex. You can't just take certain things and then loosely tie them with each other in a way that says my thing is now correct. It's not how it works. It's not how it works. It's not how we've used the term, defined the term. Like the whole feminine nature thing, it's just it doesn't make any sense.
You keep saying we, but right, we obviously have a society. We have a society that literally has laws that dictate that there's a difference between biological sex and gender. We have an understanding of what gender is and that it differs from biological sex. We know that. You know that as well, as you provided the definition originally before you got into this part where you were going to have to contradict your own definition. We, as a society,
I don't even think it's a contradiction.
We, as a society, already have the idea of what transgenderism is. We, as a society, recognize all of this. You are now trying to appeal to a specific definition so as to pigeonhole the conversation to prevent us from actually exploring any of the other definitions which completely contradict you. That's what's actually happening. You're asking me what gender's a good term, my guy. I get it. So it's crazy. I mean, I guess I could say anything is not a good term, right? Like anything, like for example,
when it comes to defining women, no, it's not a good term.
I get it. I can say anything is not a good term, but the problem is,
tell me, Fanatiq.
You are not society, so it doesn't matter what you think. What matters is what society thinks. You're not the dictionary authority, right? Like you don't put definitions in.
That's
Oxford.
fine. That's fine.
So then who cares what
I'll logically
you
go
think?
down with you. I'll go down the logical path with you then. Okay, so tell me, which do you think represents a woman better? An adult female person, female denoting to sex, right, of like the sex, which defines itself as, for a woman, for a girl, is somebody who has certain characteristics about them that are biological. This is something that is like this is this is basic biology with this one here, where they have differences about them, such as the XX chromosome, the vagina, breasts,
That
the
has
hip
nothing
to
to do with
waist
womanhood. What you're
ratio,
talking about is
all
sex.
all
None of that has
those
to do
all
with
those different things.
none of that has
Yes,
to do with
but
womanhood. That's all sex.
yeah. So hang on, what do you mean it has nothing to do with womanhood? Of course, it has
That
to do
has to
with
do with
womanhood. That
sex.
is what a woman is. Yes, and that woman is of sex, that group. That better defines a woman than somebody
No,
acting feminine.
that better describes a
No, but hang
female.
on,
That better
Fanatic.
describes a female. We've
Can you?
already defined these.
Yes,
I don't want to
so that
rehash
better
the
describes
definitions
a
with you,
female,
buddy, because
100%.
you recognize that
So
you
why
contradicted
is
yourself,
the
and now you're
woman?
just squirming. Like this is silly.
Fanatic? Why is it that woman is better defined as feminine in nature to you rather than the objective biological aspect? Why is the feminine part, like, why does that resonate better with you? Why does that work better
No,
with you than the objective biological aspect of it?
they.
That is sex.
I'm sorry. It doesn't resonate better with me than anything objective. It's an entirely different term, right? It's just like how we can understand like that there's a difference between I don't know, like light and pigment, right? Like it's not like one resonates better with me. There's just one applies in one place and doesn't apply in another. Like
Okay.
that's
Another
what
question. Why in this definition here of woman does it not include um, men who have feminine personalities?
because in that specific definition, it's referring to how the word woman is sometimes used, which is sometimes interchangeable with sex.
I just don't understand the mental gymnastics you need to get to the part where you say that a woman is also a man that has feminine traits.
It's the
I
same.
just, because I know that's where you want to go, and I don't know how you're going to
It's
get
the
there.
mental gymnastics that you have to do to be able to say, nope, no other definition exists besides my own, and like that's the one that I'm going to go with. It's the
No,
same
but
kind of
even
mental
I'm thinking about it a bit
gymnastics.
more, and I can actually accept all these perfectly fine. But
Okay.
I don't think I can accept the part where you say a man with feminine traits is a woman, because that's where you want to go. I know you haven't said it explicitly, but I
Mm.
know that's where you want to go, and I don't know how you can say that that is also a woman,
Wait. We would use the word
a man
trans.
with feminine traits.
No, we wouldn't just say a man with feminine traits is a woman. There's a difference, right? Like there's a difference between a feminine man and a trans woman.
What's the difference?
The trans woman is a person who identifies as a female. Yeah, I mean as a woman. A trans person feels compelled to identify with the gender opposite of their biological sex.
So
At
you're
birth.
appealing to the nature thing, the femininity, right, and the masculinity. So you are appealing to that.
It doesn't have to be natural. It could be self-imposed. It could be learned characteristics. A person can
So
learn like how to be more feminine and decide to express themselves, and that would make that
so
person
even
and
trans,
they can identify as trans.
even trans people, you would just say are feminine but male, or feminine or masculine but female. Even then, like,
I
it's
would
just not
not.
a good term.
So I would well sure I would say a trans woman would probably yeah, trans woman would be a male, but a woman they'd be a male but a woman. Yeah,
But that doesn't make any sense though.
it does.
They
If you
have
wait, hold on.
feminine,
So you're
they're
so
feminine
okay.
aspects
So
of
you're
a
saying
woman, but that is not the primary definition.
okay, I got you.
It's
So hold on. Can you say can a male want to represent themselves as feminine, and can a male take on social norms from the female sex?
Yeah, of course they can.
Okay. So then that means that a male would be of a different gender in that case?
Yeah, like I think that's the line of reasoning that all you guys are trying to
No, no, no.
utilize. Yeah,
No, I'm asking you to answer the question. Can a male be of a different gender?
Yeah, sure. Like you can use your gender term all you want.
Okay.
Like
And
I think
how many?
I think I've actually finally realized
Sure. What's the
that
title?
I
What's
don't
the
need to
title?
use gender at all for
I got you.
anything.
What's the title for the gender?
Which gender?
Any. Name a gender.
What, transgender?
Okay. Name another one.
Non-binary?
I don't think non-binary is a gender, but okay, maybe it is. Maybe it is. Okay. Do you have
It's the
any?
lack of gender.
Okay, there you go. Do you have any more?
Well, there's
Is-
the femininity.
Can woman be? I don't think femininity is a gender. Can woman be a gender?
Can woman be a gender? It is what you
Yes.
guys define as. Yeah.
Okay. So and man can be a gender.
Yeah, it's what you guys define as. But you guys take the nature of the femininity from it. You guys don't actually take the sexual term from it. But from what I've actually looked at here,
Right.
I thought it was related to sex, but I'm having a look at gender, and you guys don't.
Right. All right. So good. So since you know that now, then you can understand that a trans person can be of a different gender.
It is literally the worst term I've found.
Okay, good. It's a
Gender
really bad
is
term.
a terrible term.
Okay, good. It's a terrible term. But understanding that terrible term, you recognize that, as terrible as that term is, that a person, a male, can be of a different gender, right?
Well, that's what you guys believe. I don't like looking at it now.
Who's you guys? You talking
I
about
don't think-
society again? Are you talking about society?
Well, yeah, like there are some
Okay.
parts of society that believe in these things, but I actually don't think. Like, I think it's a terrible term, honestly. Like, we
Okay.
can say gender, but like from every aspect here, gender is borrowing from the sexual terms. It is borrowing and taking terms away, which
I'll be 100% honest with you. I'm not really like your feelings and how much you appreciate the term doesn't really matter as much, right? Like what really matters is what society says. And when you keep saying you guys, you're talking about society, right? Like,
yeah, but you got to
we're talking
remember,
about, our laws.
It makes things
our
confusing.
Country. It's not
because
very,
now
it's not very confusing.
now these definitions aren't clear.
No.
We've brought gender into the mix, and now the definitions aren't clear.
Wait, hold on.
A male that has
changing the definition of gender doesn't have anything.
Is now also a woman.
The definition of gender doesn't have any doesn't impose anything on the definition of sex, right? So those are different genders. I mean, those are different definitions.
Okay, would you agree with this, Fanatiq? Right? Would you agree with this, Fanatiq? A somebody who is sexually, biologically a male who likes to play with dolls is also a woman.
This person who is
as long as they tell themselves that they are a woman. As long as they tell you that they are a woman.
It wouldn't. No, that wouldn't be enough. Just because they tell themselves that they're a woman doesn't immediately make them a woman.
They have feminine aspects. They are of feminine nature. You know, they might go around in a dress.
So wait,
is that not enough?
Okay, I don't know why you're trying to straw man me. Like, is that do you believe that? Because I've never said anything like that. So why are you straw manning?
What do you mean? What's straw man? I'm giving you a hypothetical.
Well, I'm saying the answer to that is no. Unless you believe that, then that's not an argument that we should be going back and forth in. Do you agree with? Do you? Okay, good. We both agree with no. So then why are you trying to force me down that straw man?
What do you mean? This is not a straw man. It's a hypothetical.
Well, if it's just a hypothetical, and I answered your question no, and you agreed with it, then why are you arguing against my answer?
Because I was just asking you a question.
If it was if you were just asking me a question after I answered it, then why did you then begin arguing against the opposite of it?
What argument against the opposite? Where did I argue?
Well, I said no, and then you said, "What isn't it be? Wouldn't it be because these has you started trying to defend this argument that I never made."
Okay, I think we're mixing things up here.
Oh,
so
I'm not the one getting mixed.
All I gotta say is that this here, like the masculinity, femininity is just one aspect of a biological sex. Like it comes from their biological sex. It is something that we have socially defined. Yes. Like we can look at things and be like, that is.
You're contradicting yourself again.
No, hang on. Let me finish.
All right, you've been doing the vast majority of the talking in this conversation so far, man, and you just keep rambling on. You're contradicting yourself again. You can't say that femininity comes from biological sex after you just mentioned earlier that there can be a feminine male.
No,
right?
because the problem is that the gender term fucking ruins everything. Because using gender is a fucking nonsense term. If
We
I
didn't. I didn't use
completely,
the word
if
gender.
I,
I didn't use the word
if
gender.
I
I'm talking
complete,
about your definition, your
if we
statement about
completely ignore
femininity. I'm not
gender,
using the word gender. You said just now that femininity comes from biological sex. Yet earlier
yes,
you made the statement that a male can be feminine.
yes,
So you're what? So you're saying a male femininity comes from biological sex?
yes, men can. Okay, men can also like because this is the thing that you don't understand is that. Hang on, have a listen. This is
I'm
one thing that you
listening.
don't understand is that men, just because they are born that way doesn't mean that they will always act of their sex. It doesn't
Okay.
mean that. But
Okay.
at the
And so
same
then when they
time,
don't act as their sex anymore,
these
it's
are
not
all
coming from their
these are
it's not
all
coming from their biological
aspects.
sex anymore?
These are all aspects of what is a woman, what is a man. These are all aspects. It doesn't mean that they have to be all of them all at the
Okay.
same time. But the thing is, even a feminine man has masculine aspects about them, masculine traits about them. There is like humans are such a fucking interesting mix where there are so many different things about us that influence us and change who we are, such as like environment, social pressures, all these other things, our genetics, you know. But like there's so many aspects that can change what we are, how we are, and all these different things. We don't understand the human brain to such an extent that we can be like, yes, 100% exactly like this kind of neuron formation here is what makes you more masculine or feminine. No, we don't have that. We don't have that yet. So we try and take, the social science track and try and look at how people act in nature, how people act in society, and we try and take aspects of that and bring it and scientifically bring it into a category, into terms, into words that we utilize to try and define the world that we live in. And this is one of them. Like, just this is one of them here. The reason why female and feminine nature, right, are in the same category is because the feminine nature, whatever we want to define it as, maybe it's just playing with dolls, maybe it's cooking in the kitchen, whatever the fuck you want to call it. All those things are mostly found in females, in girls, in the sexual term. It comes from them. You're going to try and say stuff like, "Hey, this here is, it's societal pressures." I don't think so. I think there are evolutionarily evolutionary factors that go into this that make um, women who act in this way, who want to play with dolls, who want to socialize and fucking cook in the kitchen and stuff, as more desirable. And so women have evolved to a point where these are the kinds of traits, and this is the kind of nature that they express and that they have. And so having the feminine nature under the woman definition, I think perfectly fits fine with sex and biology.
Okay. So look, here's the deal. You contradict yourself a billion times, and like out of that whole thing that you just gave, like I could probably like point out a whole bunch of contradictions. But what you'll do is you'll just run or pivot or move the goalposts or do any of the things that you've been doing thus far in the conversation. I don't think there's much more conversation to be had, right? Once we get to a point where you literally reject definitions and dictionaries unless it's a specific definition that you subscribe to, when you start throwing and rejecting out terms,
I don't
because
reject
when
it
you
anymore,
start
do
when
I?
you start when you start throwing out and rejecting terms because you just don't like them, as if you're some sort of authority on what goes in a dictionary, or when you start saying you guys are doing something, when the you guys in this case is society, when you start doing that, when you start saying I don't like my definition anymore, I'm going to a new one, when you start doing all of those things in a conversation, it's not about me being a debate, bro. It's about you being dishonest. You're not willing to
Okay.
own the very definitions that you gave, and you keep
No,
talking
I own
and
it.
you
I
keep
own it.
talking and you keep talking as if half half of the time like I'm interrupting you when you dominated the vast majority of the conversation and just kept repeating yourself over and over again. I don't really have much more to contribute. If you want to get the last word, it's all yours. But at this point, I think once you've gotten to the point where you're directly contradicting yourself and trying to like redact definitions that you provided and accuse me of changing the definition when I literally wrote it down because I knew you would do this once you got pinned, I don't have much more to give there. So you can go ahead and get the last word.
Yeah. So 100%. I'll throw my last word in here, and that is that I think gender as a term has completely muddied what is socially known. I think it's completely muddied the biological term of female, woman, and all the other things. Me looking at the Merriam-Webster definition right now of woman, and after expressing what I expressed just earlier, talking about the feminine and biological nature of women and where it comes from, which is sex, I actually agree with every part of the definition here in the Merriam-Webster for woman. And I think if I completely ignore gender as a concept and as a term, as to not muddy everything, I think everything stays logically consistent and makes the most sense. So I think at the end of that's all I got to say about that. I just think gender is a terrible term to use, especially when you're trying to understand and get to the bottom of society and who we are.
All right, man. What was your name again? The Boom Man?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Come to the politics Discord. We can debate.
I mean, I feel like we debated here. Why would I need to go there? Is there more to be Is there more to be discussed on this topic?
Not really. Like I think I've gotten a better understanding of these now. Like even though we disagreed, I think this was wholly constructive, at least in the way that I would go across and start debating these terms. Because I'll tell you what, now that we've talked about these things, I am more resolute in my belief in these terms and these definitions. Sure. And and as much as you want to make it out that I'm pivoting and jumping back, doing this and the other, I think it's more or less that I'm understanding these differences a bit better. And I've been a little bit slow, must admit, because I didn't really have a amazing understanding before. But now that I've had a look at these things, and and I've debated them and I've talked to you with it, I think I'm now more resolute in my belief and understanding of these terms and definitions.
Well, sure. I mean, I guess that's your prerogative. Maybe in the future, whenever you define it, make sure that you're like really careful so that you don't end up giving a definition that you have to walk back once someone pins you to a contradiction.
Yeah, but I've never cared about that stuff. That's all. Like that is literally just debate bro stuff.
I don't think it's debate bro stuff. I think it shows a lack of honesty and it shows a lack of integrity. Like being 100% honest. No,
not true.
Absolutely. Like if I stick to, it's not about changing your mind. It's when you it depends on the motivation for changing your mind. For example, a person can change their mind anytime, and a person might say, "Well, I believe that if a person gets caught stealing, I believe this punishment should happen to them until they find out it happened to their son. Their son gets caught stealing, and then they say, well, hold on, let's not be too rash here." You have a right to change your mind, but someone should always be able to analyze what's your motivation behind changing your mind. Are you changing your mind only because of bias? Are you changing your mind because it's inconvenience for you? Are you changing your mind because you got caught with your hand in the cookie jar? No, you don't have to tell me we all witnessed it. You changed your mind because it was very obvious that what you just did was completely contradicted yourself. There's nothing more to it.
The aspect of it is that it doesn't make any sense. Using gender doesn't make any sense.
You can say that all you like to, but you used gender earlier and were perfectly comfortable using gender. And as I gave you examples about a gender, you were totally fine with it. And the only thing that made you realize you were quote unquote wrong is when you realized that it was logically untenable, the position that you were holding, and you were absolutely walking down a road where you were contradicting yourself because I had an actual definition to pin you to. It's not a matter of to
use gender. That's what I found.
I got you, but you were perfectly fine using gender until you recognized
I changed my mind.
I got you. But the reason why you changed your mind, again, it's not just that you changed your mind, it's the motivation behind why you changed your mind. You can be smarmy. I do know it because you were perfectly fine with it, and not only did you provide the definition, so this is something you were comfortable with that you gave me after I applied your definition to several scenarios before we started an actual debate. You were perfectly content and perfectly comfortable with it, and the only thing that motivated you to change it is after we got down to a logical tree in which there was a contradiction. There's no other reason why you changed it. And even in your ending soliloquy, you also mentioned that the only thing that, it begins, I don't like the phrase gender because gender starts muddying up the water and it gets a little bit more messy and it's more confusing, and I don't like the term. That's what you said. And the only reason why it's confusing, the only reason why it's muddying the waters in any capacity is because it causes you to contradict yourself, because it doesn't actually hold up. It's untenable. And that's exactly what happened. And any person watching this can see it.
Yeah, absolutely. You absolutely muddies it. That's what I'm agreeing with. I'm not agreeing with the whole thing that you're saying there.
You don't have to. Wherever y'all can see it. I don't need your concession on whether or not that happened. It was very readily apparent to any person that hears this.
I think you'll find that gender has to steal and take from other definitions for it to make any sense. Okay. And even then, it's still a term that isn't really required. You have a look at woman and you can see the feminine thing. Like if you have a look at man, it'll probably come up with the masculine nature thing. So these things are already under the label of woman and man. So you really don't need to go and start talking about gender. You really don't need to start going on about femininity, masculinity. You can just use those terms as well. You don't even need to use gender. Like gender in itself is a completely nonsense term.
Okay.
It's just not required. We have so many other terms that really define what these are. And we just don't need gender.
Yeah,
femininity and masculinity.
It's only nonsense to you because you realize it causes you to contradict yourself.
Yeah, it causes me to contradict myself because the term is nonsense. If I want to utilize the term, I would have to be agreeing with nonsense.
And it's funny, you had no problem doing it until I showed you where it contradicted you. You totally understood.
Now I do have a problem.
I know, because I showed you where you contradicted yourself.
Yeah, you helped show me how it contradicts everything.
Yeah, so then that means you changed it. So then you were motivated in your reasoning to change it. So it was through bias.
It's not through bias at all.
Okay.
It's through logically going through the definition. I was like, hang on, this is fucking stupid.
I believe that you believe that.
All right. Well, I guess we'll just end it there then.
All right, man. Good talking to you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Peace out.